female hollow children can be impregnated by a human male.
What?
That's probably gonna require some explaining.
You're just an old school Yakuza crook, aren't you?
From the team that brought you Yakuza. No, not that Yakuza. Yeah, that one. From the team that brought you all the Yakuza Like a Dragon games comes easily the most Americanized game they've ever released. American characters played by American voice actors with a story about cliché action movie Americans infiltrating a company in Japan to save the world. You know this is gonna be good. Let's get right into it. This is Binary Domain. Binary Domain takes place in the year 2080. The world got unreasonably hot, wiping out nearly 75% of habitable land. This forced mankind to build new, raised cities above old cities destroyed by the rising tides and heat. After the flooding, millions of people were killed, significantly damaging the Earth's workforce. Humans then created an artificial workforce made up of AI robots, all controlled by the United Nations New Geneva Convention. Unfortunately, this goes a little too far, resulting in humanoid robots that look like real humans, which are named Hollow Children. The UN then brings in various legal clauses and safeties to prevent robots that can pass as humans, known as Clause 21. They also create a task force known as Rust Crews to destroy any Hollow Children that do exist. Unfortunately, eventually, a Hollow Child shows up at the HQ of a robot company called Bergen. They think that they're human, but they're Hollow Children. They don't know they're robots. It's assumed that there's a corporation, Amada Corp. It's suspected that they're the ones who created this Hollow Child. As a result, Rust Crews head out to get to the CEO of Amada to bring them to the UN for questioning. That's the basic setup then. We're playing as Dan, who's the leader of the Rust team that gets sent to Tokyo to get to the Amada CEO. At its core, Binary Domain is your usual cover shooter, a genre I really miss these days. You hold A to run, you push A to cover, you pop your head out, and shoot. You change weapons with the D-pad. It's nothing crazy. The core shooting of the basic enemies is mostly based on dismemberment. If you headshot them, they lose their vision and decide to start team killing other robots. For some reason they don't shoot at you though. All the robots can be shredded into pieces one limb at a time, and can often survive way longer than you'd think. You can knock both their legs off, but they'll still crawl at you. You can blow up the arm that's holding their gun, and they'll pick the gun up with their other arm. Throughout the entire 12-ish hour campaign, this combat never gets old. Watching the different types of robots struggle to attack you while adapting to changes in their limb arrangements is just so cool. Just in case it were to get old though, Binary Domain loves switching up the shooting combat as often as it can. Stuff like sliding down this massive water slide, swimming to this giant boat while dodging all sorts of hazards, or flying through a flooded tunnel system on jet skis. This is clearly where RGG used their usual minigame budget. It's all really well done too. None of it feels too clunky and none of it drags on too long. All the little gimmicks are short, sweet, high budget moments that show off what the team can do. Binary Domain feels like exactly what it is. A Japanese studio attempting to make a game to appeal to American audiences at a time when the market was saturated with Gears of War style cover shooters. Travis Willingham voices Dan, the main character. Who's Travis Willingham? Well, that's Laura Bailey's husband. If you don't know who Laura Bailey is, she's Abby from The Last of Us 2, and Nadine from Uncharted. She's here as well, of course, playing as Faye Lee. Sorry, that was maybe a bit rude to Travis. He's got credits as well. He's Knuckles in Sonic, Guile in Street Fighter, Thor in the Marvel games, and has roles in a ton of different anime franchises like the English dub of Dragon Ball. Troy Baker? Yep, here as well. He's in every game. That's Joel from The Last of Us, and that one guy from Unearthed Trials of Ibn Tuda. Troy Baker plays Charles here, doing the worst English accent I've ever heard.
Is it supposed to be me? Yeah.
This is also a squad-based game. See, there's a handful of times where you can pick who you want fighting alongside you, which is pretty cool. It gives you different dialogue options for the gameplay and cutscenes, which is crazy considering how high profile some of these actors are. But yes, a cutscene ends, you pick who you want, and then you can use the squad controls to kinda control them. You've really just got 4 options. Shoot, take cover, cover me, and retreat. You can hold L1 and just pick whichever one of those you want. But this is a linear, practically corridor-based shooter where you're shooting robots 90% of the time. They know how to shoot robots without your input, and they do. Binary Domain also has voice recognition, so you can issue voice commands to your AI squad mates if you have a headset to do it with.
What a dynamite bod. You're in agreement, am I right?
Definitely. Definitely. Yes. Yes.
You know it.
Most of the time, I had no idea what it wanted me to say. You pretty much have to hold L1 to bring up the list of options, then just say the thing instead of pushing the button that corresponds to the thing.
But I got a hunch we'll get through this one, too. You feel me?
Sure.
Don't go negative on me, Dan. Just trying to keep our spirits up, you know?
I wasn't. I said yes.
That's my boy. Let's move out.
Alright. It's cool, but it loses its charm really quickly. It doesn't work most of the time, and it forces you to stop and read more than the amount of time that you spend in the upgrades menu. Right, this game has an upgrade menu. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine, but it's very basic and has the same problem as most games with tacked on skill trees. It's a linear game. There's no way to know what's coming up next or who's going to be on my team for most of the rest of the game unless you played through it multiple times. It'd just be nice if the game automatically balanced this stuff rather than forcing me to pause the game to select stupid random upgrade buffs to my character and the CPU characters if it's going to be this simple. What I ended up doing is just waiting till I had a bunch of currency and then buying all the upgrades in order based on the price. Boss battles in Binary Domain are all fun, hectic, creative, and cinematic as all hell. Every single one of them continues the gameplay trend of knocking off limbs one at a time to take them out, but the spectacle of the boss battles amps it all up to the extreme. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I at least want to show you some of the cool ones. We briefly looked at this one earlier, but the spider boss is crazy. He's got shielded legs and a weak point on the bottom of his belly. Most of the boss battle is spent running around on the battlefield looking for rocket launcher ammo so you can shred his armor. Once you knock off each leg, he adapts and switches up the way he leans and walks. Then there's this massive ship, where you need to use lock-on rockets to shred the engines that are keeping it afloat. This one's hard because you're also juggling endless waves of flying enemies that block your rocket from hitting the main boss ship. This battle against Philip is a lot like that mini-boss from Enslaved Odyssey to the West. This one is a lot less limb-based, mostly requiring you to keep shooting him over and over again while avoiding his charge attacks. The pillars in the middle of the battlefield are just as useful as they were in Yakuza. Then there's the more creative boss battles, like this gorilla robot that you need to lure down hallways and into explosives before giving it the final blow with a turret section. There's this psychotic forklift looking thing. There's this weird transformer robot that chases you down the street in the game's absolutely sick on-rail section. There's this massive Medusa boss battle where you have to rotate the entire chandelier-like robot to spin it around so you can hit its weak point. There's this thing. The boss battles in this game are insane, and I can't stress in words just how much the sheer amount of them mixed with the sheer number of weird gimmicky levels helped with the pacing of the game. It doesn't even need to be this good. The story holds your attention from start to finish anyway. Alright, so back to the story. Global warming flooded the entire planet. Governments around the world used the ruined cities as foundations for new cities, elevated above the old ones. Since most of the population died in the floods, Amada, a Japanese company, made the first humanoid robots to replace humans in the workforce. Bergen, a US company, ripped off the Japanese designs and did the exact same thing. Amada tried to sue Bergen, but the lawsuit failed, since Bergen had already become one of the biggest and largest companies in the whole world. This resulted in Bergen owning 95% of the robotics market. Bergen, the US company, then made a series of international laws known as the New Geneva Convention. One of the clauses, Clause 21, bans research into holochildren. Rust crews were created to deal with any breaches of that convention. Then, that attack at the Burn-In headquarters happened. The Rust crew, led by Dan, is heading into Japan to infiltrate Amada Corp, who's assumed to be making the holochildren. We begin at the Seawall.
Welcome to Japan, brother.
That's my welcome? Your ugly ass? Where's all my dancing geisha girls?
You ain't seen what I'm wearing under this wetsuit.
Is it lace?
And it doesn't take long for the robot defenses to begin attacking.
Damn it.
Eventually, a Grand Lancer appears, but they don't have the firepower to take it out, so they jump into the water. The swimming mission is way too easy and kinda gameplay patty. You quite literally just swim forward and push button prompts until Dan and Bo reach the boat. They then head into a security building, where we get teased with a grapple hook mechanic that's never once used throughout the entire game again. Eventually, Dan and Bo end up in a face-off with the Grand Lancer. This fight just requires you to run past it to get to some mechanical controls that drops things on its head or bashes it with metal pipes, which knocks it down for a bit. Dan and Bo jump into this massive seawall waterway where they eventually meet up with the human children that live in the flooded city. They're scavengers. They end up getting held up by the kids and their leader.
You know, killing kids isn't my idea of fun.
Once they save the children, though, it changes the mind of the leader. They make their way through an abandoned building, eventually getting attacked by the stupid Lancer again. Thankfully, they're right at the rendezvous point to meet up with the rest of the Rust team.
Fire in the hole!
Everybody alive? Holler if you're dead.
Dan, Bo, Faye, Rachel, and Charles. They split into two teams and push forward through the city to meet with a contact named Mifune, a Japanese contact that's going to help them out. On their way, they get attacked by another Grand Lancer and learn how to take it out this time. Basically, you need to shred its armor and damage its weak point. The finale of this fight is pretty sweet, ending with Dan jumping on the Lancer's head to shoot its brains out before playing with the water graphics. Look how good this water looks. It's remarkably good for a 13-year-old game. The team goes on to Rotary to interrogate the owner to find Mifune, where Dan sees the same model robot that he killed when he was a little boy. There's this whole emotional backstory that progresses throughout the game where child Dan begins hating all robots on an extremely personal level. Anyway, eventually they learn that Mifune is watching them through the robot's cameras, and they're told to head to the Shibuya Underground Mall. On the way there, they run into this spider boss battle that I think we've talked enough about. This leads them to a little girl named Yuki. She's a 15-year-old girl who lives in the slums working for Mifune as a courier. She's been waiting for you for hours and is here to take you to Mifune. They need to go through this bathhouse district. This is one of the few times where your objective is to walk around a super detailed little area and talk to people in the street to gather intel, or talk to your team to build or lower their respect. You don't really learn a ton from talking to everybody here, but you do build karma with your team. Suddenly, a man is pulled out from the doors where we're supposed to be heading. He's a hollow child that was found buried underneath the rubble when we took out that giant spider, and he's being held down. He thinks he's human until he sees his face in the reflection. Then, he's shot. Tortured. He kills one of the gang that was holding him down and begins firing at the rest of them, but then Dan saves the day by finally taking him out.
Hey, Scraphead, over here!
They end up following Yuki to a bar called Spiral, this cool nightclub with hologram dancers, drinks, and a hidden room behind some slot machines. That hidden room leads them to Mifune, who's a Yakuza boss.
I'm in my six.
Like James Bond.
Who?
Mifune tells them how to get to the upper city, and it involves navigating a flooded subway system. Thankfully, Mifune has jet skis for us.
So I will sell you for 5 million apiece.
5 million? Whoa, 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 whoa.
The gang heads through the nightclub and the subway tunnels to get to the jet skis, leaving the little girl that helped us behind. The jet ski mission is probably the jankiest part of this whole game. It doesn't really work and it's not super exciting. There's little jumps that you can go off which sometimes look kinda cool, and there's enemies fighting in the background and some explosions and mines that you'll need to avoid, but for the most part you just hold R2 and steer every once in a while. That leads us to the boss battle with that ship that we talked about earlier, where you need to run around looking for lock-on rocket ammo to blast off all its engines while avoiding the endless waves of enemies. Once it's down, they navigate a sewer-like water system filled with a ton of suicide bomber spider bots that go down in one hit and can be easily avoided by just rolling, until they eventually reach the elevator that takes them to the upper city. The upper city is beautiful and dystopian in contrast with the flooded lower levels. It feels like a city owned by Elon Musk. Okay. Owned by Elon Musk in the year 2080. Anyway, they pop up from the sewers and convince everybody that they're supposed to be there.
Don't panic, folks. We're here just inspecting the emergency escape route.
But the peace doesn't last. Everybody's cell phone gets alerted to evacuate. A crazy 3-wheeled car whips down the street. It's Mifune's men coming to help. A French guy named Jean and his robot companion Kane pick up our gang for an on-rails police chase. Honestly, the on-rails car and train sections of this game are some of the best parts. This one starts with just fending off the police, but eventually robots on jetpacks begin attacking as well. Then there's these Batmobile robots that whip around in circles and attack you. The main two officers following the team are going to be playing a role chasing us throughout the rest of the game. Once they escape the police here, suddenly this thing appears.
Too late?
So now, Jean, the driver, is dead, but we still have Kane. Kane's gonna be with us for the rest of the game, pretty much. It's a bit odd how little resistance Dan puts up, considering we've gotten an entire backstory about how much he hates robots, but whatever. An absurd number of enemies begin attacking us, including this anthropomorphic SpaceX chopstick rocket catcher that fires missiles. The gang fights their way through the city as it enters into lockdown, making their way into the NASA building. It's an absolutely enormous food factory that's about as autonomous as the Tesla Fremont factory. They make their way to the rooftop here, since the building is officially surrounded and overrun by robots. Why the rooftop? Well, because Kane's arm is a grappling hook. Dan also has that grappling hook from earlier too, but I guess he forgets that. The cops from earlier are below the team, and gigantic flying robots begin attacking them on the rooftops. Once the robots are all down, it's Dan and Faye's turn to cross the building. Of course, the cops shoot the line, causing Dan to fall on top of the train. Faye gets rescued by Kane and also dropped on the train. But why did he pick her over Dan?
She is much prettier than you, monsieur.
Yeah, alright. Enemies begin attacking. I sent Kane to the front of the train to override the drive system, leaving just Dan and Faye to defend it. This is absolutely sick. Enemies inside of this train start trying to kill you, but also flying enemies, one of which nearly splits the train in half. They jump onto the roof of the train car and jump across the gap to stay with Kane. You can really tell they were going for an Uncharted 2 train mission here, which was released 3 years prior to Binary Domain. They fight on the roof, jump back into the train, and kill more enemies until they make their way to Kane when...
Oh, shit! Faye! Faye, talk to me. Say something.
Please,
What? What?
please stop shouting in my ear. It's just a shoulder hit. I'll live.
They reroute the train and speed it up, but it quickly gets attacked by the Transformer robot boss battle guy. It grabs the train, stopping it in its tracks. The guys escape out of the train and onto the boarding area, where they fight endless waves of enemies until that gorilla boss battle appears. This guy's your usual Binary Domain mini-boss. You've got to knock off all his armor and damage his weak points as much as possible. Once it's down, this resistance guy named Shindo shows up and gives it the final blow. He explains that the robot they just took down will never stop following them until it's dead, just like the cops that are chasing Dan and the gang. He's gonna need to deal with them one way or another. Obviously, they get attacked by way more robots, but the finale for the gorilla takes place here. You've just got to evade it over and over again, flank around the room and pass some sealed doors, then wait for it to break through, shoot the explosives, and do it again. Then, the turret section with the world's slowest to rotate turret you've ever seen happens. We've already talked about all this though. They head to Shindo's base, but Faye's arm begins hurting more. Dan takes her away to bandage her up. Turns out Yafune from earlier is here at Shindo's underground resistance base. He's just here to keep an eye on Faye.
Mifune? What are you doing here?
Protecting my investment.
He's gonna help us get into the Amada building. He knows a way in, and it involves a garbage truck.
Oh, gee, thanks. Because the last one was so great.
Just as the guys get ready to head on out to finish this off, Shindo's best friend and teammate, Yoshiki, freezes in place, unable to move. Then...
all of you stay where you are.
Look out!
No!
oh no, it's the forklift monster.
You've gotta be shitting me!
The forklift fight is sick. Look at this enemy design. God damn, insane. You have to break off its 4 arms that it uses to crush you or throw explosives at you. Eventually they win the fight and flee in the garbage truck to push forward with the plan to infiltrate Amada. In the truck, Shindo's beating himself up for trusting a hollow child and wants revenge. Shindo clearly wants to kill the CEO of Amada, while our Rust crew orders are to take him alive. The cops are also following them. Somehow, they've found the garbage truck. I don't know. Also, more Batmobile robots and the usual arsenal of robots start attacking. Yep, it's another on-rail section. And yes, it's just as good as all the other ones. Most of the fight is spent taking out enemies as usual, while the vehicle gets shredded to pieces. Everybody jumps from the trailer to the back of the cab of the truck, but this absolutely enormous robot called the SAR Runner is chasing them. Come on, look how cool this is. It's the same concept as all the other bosses. Knock off the armor and hit the shiny bits, but the destruction on the street that this thing causes just never gets old. The way each limb catches on fire, all the little gimmicky moments like when Faye almost falls off of the truck and has to be pulled up in a QuickTime event, so good. Once they take it out, they get to Amada, but the ruse of pretending they're a garbage disposal company isn't gonna work anymore. It's the final mission. They fight all the enemies in the corridor in front of the Amada building. They hack a SpaceX booster-catching robot to remotely control it and use it to blow up constant waves of enemies. The police follow them in a helicopter. When they get into the building, the place is a wasteland. There's no humans anywhere, just this one lobby employee bot. They're here to get evidence that Amada is building hollow children, and to capture Amada, the guy. And it should be pretty easy with no enemies in here. Just kidding. This crazy acrobatic shinobi robot appears, which seems like it's gonna be a boss battle, but it's actually just a new enemy type. Once it's down, there's still no robots anywhere, but then it turns out that the chandelier above them is actually a massive defense robot. This is the Medusa fight that we talked about earlier, but it's worth bringing up just how fun this fight is one more time. Everything about this thing's design is interesting. You've got to use your guns to disable the tentacles, which allows Dan to climb up to the top of it, avoiding platformer-like beams of electricity on his way up. Once he's on the upper levels, you've just got to avoid its rockets, kill waves of respawning enemies, and rotate the entire chandelier, shooting its weak point when it's visible. Finally, they defeat it and keep pushing forward through the Amada building.
Kane, you picking anything up?
Oui, monsieur. The need to duck.
It's the gossiest boss battle. This one's pretty easy, just because it's so slow and pathetic. You just shoot it over and over again and avoid its blasts. It's extremely easy if you throw hologram grenades to distract it too. Just after they kill it, the police from earlier show up. The gang is screwed. There's no getting out of this one. They're about to get arrested. But just before that can happen...
Screw it. Run!
I wouldn't advise that.
This guy is Amada. He can somehow control the robots with his brain. He must have an Elon Musk Neuralink implant, which is actually a thing that'll be able to control the Optimus bots just by thinking.
The motor commands from your brain that would go to your biological arms now go to your robot arms or robot legs.
He uses it to hack into Kane and force him to focus on nothing but suffering.
Help me!
Dan dreams about the time he was a child again, beating the robot. We get a bit more backstory into what started this. His mother was crying and his father is passed out drunk on the couch. Dan and the cop from earlier wake up in a scrap garbage area where they get attacked by a steady stream of zombie-like robots pieced together from scrap metal. They slowly start meeting up with their teammates throughout and begin running into creepy half-built hollow children, including multiple variants of the same model that Yoshiki was. Faye, Kane are all still somewhere in the building, but the rest of the team regroups. They have production data on hollow children that can prove that Amada has violated Clause 21 as well as a multitude of other clauses. We learn that Bo and
Commander Charles Gregory
know something that Dan is going to want to know, but before they can let it out,
Holy crap, Greg!
Mutual Complaint 0988 order is activated, forcing all the hive mind of robots worldwide to work together and ensure the destruction of their competitors. The tremor that they felt earlier was a missile firing at the Tokyo Seawall, as well as every capital city around the globe, and with a plan to blow up
the Amada court building.
What?
New mission then. They need to shut down the satellite that's controlling the robots worldwide. There's another boss battle with a new guy that keeps trying to eat Bo, but realistically, all Dan needs to do is an epic set-piece moment happens where the team has to escape the collapsing Amada building. Constant explosions, collapsing floors, it's all so slick. They make it off the building and over to the other side.
What is it? Holler if you're dead, huh?
Oh, it's very funny. Really cute. And no, not everyone is here.
Damn, man, listen.
That the females he created. The ones that are named on this chip.
What? No. No, that's bullshit. Look, don't you dare try to tell me that Faye is a scraphead.
Damn, so Faye isn't human, but she's not really a robot either. She's a hybrid offspring. Her parents are made up of one part human and one part robot.
Hybrid offspring leave no mechanical traces. Okay? They're strong, they're fast, resistant to disease, but completely undetectable.
No.
Dan is angry, real angry. The exfil team is on its way to evacuate them, so they begin making their way to the exit. Dan starts arguing with all his team about whether or not to save her, and he seems like he's very much taking the side of saving her. They find a mummy tomb with a dead body in it.
Huh, a dead body. Who could have expected that?
Very funny. It's Amada. Yoji Amada.
Aw, man. They get attacked by a bunch of robots, but then Amada shows up again for a villain monologue. The mummy is Amada's father. This Amada that you're looking at here is a hollow child, and he's assumed to be remote controlled somewhere nearby, but he's actually not. Robot Amada explains that 40 years ago, Burn-In stole his father's life worth, all the patents and inventions he dedicated his life building. Amada Corp was unfairly branded as a thief for the things that the American government had stolen from him. When this happened, he dedicated his entire life to advancing robotics forward, making robots that are indistinguishable from humans. He obsessed with the project. He was obsessed with one-upping Bergen and exposing their thefts. He learned that the concept of suffering is essential to life and evolution. Evolution is driven by consciousness wanting to escape suffering and fear. This leads to robots that are self-aware. We learn that the true agenda of Geneva was to ban robots that are superior to humans. The first robot that Amada built that has this is the one that we're talking to right now. This hyper-intelligent AGI robot learned that the best way to evolve was to bite the hand that feeds. He captured his father, imprisoned him, and watched him die of starvation. He watched pain and suffering, witnessing what caused his own evolution. With Amada dead, the next goal was to make sure that he cannot be terminated. He needed to find a way to reproduce, which is why he made the Hollow Children that can't be identified. All the hybrid Hollow Children like Faye are offsprings of this guy, and his plan is to replace humans with robots that are faster, stronger, smarter, and better in every way possible. He's already begun that process.
Faye?
You're going to murder 108 innocent people because you don't like their parents.
It ain't murder, they ain't human.
See, that's the kind of bullshit that makes me ashamed to be part human.
Once they win the fight against the shinobi bots, Faye ends up taking Charlie hostage. Dan refuses to shoot her. He throws his weapon to the ground, but Faye's a dirty robot. She shoots anyway. Dan dives for the gun, grabs it, and fires at her head, but the bullet just bounces off even though it went through her shoulder earlier in the game. The boss fight against Faye is mostly just shooting her over and over again. They win the battle, but Faye is still alive, just down. Robot Amada gets shot in the head and killed. Why was Faye's head bulletproof? Now Faye's real mad. She teams up with a bunch of shinobi bots and continues her attack on Dan. This fight scene is a super cool motion captured fight that's honestly really emotional. You can tell neither of them want to kill each other, but they feel the need to due to their beliefs that may or may not be a metaphor for racism. Dan wins the fight.
I'm sorry.
New mission is to shut down the control unit that was controlling Robo Amada. Faye opens her eyes and looks at Dan. He actually didn't shoot her. He just pretended. He shot the ground beside her. They head to the main AI system that was controlling everything, and it too looks like the end of Enslaved Odyssey to the west. Then, just as they're about to blow up the AI, a huge plot twist happens. The robots in this room are from the US, and the Rust team's commander steps towards the team. He's secretly been using us to take over the overly powerful world-ending AI. The only person who knew about this plan was...
Game over, Dan. Just the way it has to be.
Bo? Are you crazy?
His plan is to remove it, keep it for the US, and to nuke the Amada base, leaving behind Dan and the rest of the team.
Any last words?
Yeah. Tell your mama I loved her.
Nice of you to finally notice.
The final fight against numerous military robots is hard as hell, but thank God for these pillars, honestly. Commander Phil smashes through the wall. He smashes Bo into the wall, and he rubs it in that he's the only person that can stop the nukes.
Well, then I guess you're going down with us.
Dan fights, and the entire thing is crazy epic. It ends with Phil being knocked out of the cockpit before Dan grabs a rocket launcher and fires directly at the AI. The nuke will strike in 20 seconds.
3, 2.
But the nukes don't fire. When Amada hacked all the robots and gave them consciousness, the robots that were gonna fire the nukes decided it wasn't in their best interest for survival, so they disobeyed the order. Phil shoots himself in the head, which makes this seem like an all-around happy ending, but Bo is still bleeding out.
Holler if you're dead.
Faye decides to go on without Dan. Charlie agrees to lie and say that she went missing in action. It seems everybody's accepted that these hybrid robots exist, everybody except Bergen. They've decided to build more Rust teams with the goal of killing all 108 hybrids, including Faye. A sequel is then teased, where the hybrids retreat from hiding, decide that humans are a threat, and inevitably make Faye their leader.
I've got a feeling this is not the end.
Faye is still in hiding, with robots still patrolling the planet, this time controlled by the US government instead of Amada. Any sight of Faye is a shoot-to-kill order, but unfortunately for the robots, Dan and Faye have teamed up to the very end.
Dan, how did you find me?
And that's a wrap on the Binary Domain campaign. This game also had online multiplayer, and the servers are still up to this very day. You can legitimately just go play Binary Domain online. I conned my friend into buying this game just to try it out. For competitive modes, there's a plethora of modes to pick from, mostly all ripped right from a Call of Duty game. Then there's a co-op horde mode where you fight waves of enemies. Unfortunately, unless you have a full lobby, the game just puts you in a pre-game state where you can see other players, but you can't actually kill anybody. And in the horde mode, no enemies spawn. Maybe this would have been better in the planned sequel. Of course, the sequel never came out. This game ended up selling less than 100,000 copies worldwide. Despite the fact that this was crazy good in every possible way, the reviews for it were shockingly mediocre. Again, this came out at a time when Gears of War style cover shooters were being released nearly consistently. Binary Domain didn't do enough to differentiate itself from the others, but every single thing that it did right. The limb dismember mechanics and the particle effects and the destruction that you get to witness when you kill them truly never got old throughout this game. I keep saying that, but it's true. The story kept me hooked from start to finish. The voice acting is sometimes super dumb, but it's fun. The weapons are all fun to use too. The reviews are really unfair, and I can't recommend it enough that anybody that watches this goes and plays the game for themselves. It's really, really good. But that's all I got for Binary Domain though. If you liked the video and want to see more of them, you know what to do. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Alright, love you guys. Peace.